I guarantee you, we talked about this briefly. We talk about what we're going to say ahead of the podcast. Now we go off a little bit, so I'm not throwing things at him and trying to trick Doctor into saying like, well, what about this or what about that? We did talk about the other locations because every time something comes up, Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, Sodom and Gomorrah, the exit of the Israelites from Egypt, Ron Wyatt comes up, and they're going to say, well, what about that location? They might not even know where it's at. They just say, well, this Ron Wyatt guy, he found sulfur balls. Now, this location he's talking about is actually not that far from Masada. It's about a little east of Masada, but it's actually on the west side, southwest side of the Dead Sea. Now, okay, why not that location?
Well, I did the research in my book on the location of Sodom, produced maps where you have sulfur all over and all around the Dead Sea region. So just because you find sulfur balls doesn't mean you found the destruction of Sodom. Our site, for example, with the hot springs we have on them, they smell of sulfur because of the hot springs. So
Right.
There's sulfur all around there.
Right.
So, and brimstone, goprit, sometimes is translated as sulfur, but also can be translated as fire. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you find sulfur balls, you'll find a city. We've actually have a city that we've excavated that's 10 times larger than Jericho and Jerusalem at that time period. It's 10 acres. We're over 50 some acres. So we have a place that is even mentioned. Sodom's mentioned in the Ebla tablets because they're trading with them. Now, if this site is not Sodom, here's the question. If this site is not Sodom, and it's a key site in the ancient Near East because it's 60 some acres, 62, I think it is, acres in total. Right. And Jerusalem's mentioned in the Bible, and Jericho's mentioned in the Bible, then what is the name of the site that the Bible has refused or had neglected to mention that was one of the key places to live at the time? Well, they mentioned it. It's Sodom and Gomorrah and the 5 cities of the plain.
All right. Now, now I studied. I got my DMin from Trinity Southwest, and so a little bit of theology there, and then later I finished my PhD in archaeology. So I got some archaeology, and I got some theology. That doesn't mean it's all conclusive. I think once we get our degrees, that's when we start learning. Yes. We really start learning. But the thing is that I'm not a geologist. I'm not an anthropologist. So, I look for peer review in all these areas. And in looking at the sulfur balls, I had to talk to a geologist. He used some pretty big words, but he explained the sulfur balls on the southern end of the Dead Sea. The west side, I don't know about the east side, but on the west side for sure, because that's where a lot of people go because of the Ron White experience. He said that's natural
yes.
in that environment. And as the ocean receded over many years, that's a natural occurrence. So that stuff, those sulfur balls, did not fall from the sky and land there. They are natural. Matter of fact, there's no indication. If they were burning coming from the sky and hit that sand, there should be implications of burning in that area as well. But there's not. There's just, now this is not me because I don't know nothing about this. Because when I was a pastor up there, you pastored a church too at one time, didn't you? You were a pastor for a number of years?
Yes.
I was a pastor at a church, and of course that comes up. People come in and say, what about this? I don't know. Let me talk to a geologist. Let me see what they have to say. And they got, somebody that's been involved with that. So I was lucky enough to get involved, not involved, but contact somebody that knew. And he said, well, this is natural substance in that area. That's the best way I can put it. I don't know the technical words.
The
so just because it's there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The scientific papers that I produced in my book on the location of Sodom deal with all of those papers that you're talking about, dealing with the sulfur and the sulfur balls. So I I reference all of that in the book if they want to look it up and they want to read the scientific papers. They're there. What's interesting is at Tel El Hammam, we have over a meter, some places 3 meters of in the soil after with the destruction at the Middle Bronze period. So we have the evidence of the destruction of the city that had been burned violently. And the other thing we have directional indication with all of the destruction. So everything's been blown into one direction from the meteor that had exploded in the air. The airburst blew everything off its pedestals, the mud brick walls, the pottery is all pushed into one direction. We have pottery that's turned into glass. So we have high temperatures. You turn it over and you can see the pottery. On the other side, you see glass dripping off the edge of it. So in a very intense heat and then extreme cooling or sudden cooling to freeze it. So it's not in a kiln. It's not something that the pottery was put in a kiln to glaze it. Glazing happened many years later. We sent it to a lab in Albuquerque, New Mexico for testing. And they came back and said, oh, this is trinitite. This is stuff that happened at ground zero at the nuclear blast at Trinity, New Mexico.
But then you got a tough time working it.
This is radioactive. So we have all of the evidence pointing in one direction: the salt, the meteor, the destruction, the pottery, the char. It all points to this being Sodom.
Okay, so we can say number one right here that it's not southwest of the Dead Sea. It's got nothing to do with the sulfur balls. Whether they, okay, Numer and Babadran. That's the next one we're going to get hit with. I can see it coming, and I'm going to they're going to ask me, through Bible Interact, well, what about this? So, but you went there too. You were a big fan, of course, I guess, of Numer and Babadra being Sodom before you changed your mind. So what about Numer and Babadra? What was, what's the attraction of it being, you could say, a candidate for Sodom at that time?
Well, it looks like it's been destroyed because it's down at the bottom end of the Dead Sea, and it's pretty desolate down there. The problem with the argument is that Babadra was destroyed in the early Bronze period, and nobody believes that Abraham and Lot lived in the early Bronze period. And after that time period, the early Bronze, it's off the map. Nobody is living there. Mm-hmm. There's a small resurgence of people living there for a short period of time.
That's right.
But in the Middle Bronze period, when Lot and Abraham come walking through that area, nobody's home. The other significance is that Numerah, that everybody says is Gomorrah, was destroyed 250 years later. Now, unless you believe there's been 2 destructions, one of Sodom and then 250 years later, one of Gomorrah, they cannot be the cities of the plain. And even the famous Albright, William F. Albright, said he came through the region looking for them in the south end of the Dead Sea. He knew of Babadra and said it can't be Sodom because it's too early. And he speculated, well, it must be under the Dead Sea then.
Right, did, yes.
Well, at that time period, Tel El Hammam was under mines during the war with Israel and Jordan. They couldn't excavate it.
Wait a second, there were mines there where you were excavating at one time?
At one time, yes. That's why it had never been excavated.
Oh, well, who's to say they didn't accidentally leave a few behind, and you're out there with a hammer, ding, 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 ding.
Good one, George. Well, to be honest, the sheep and the goats that walk over the till every day got most of them. So
very good. Let the goats go first.
But they did demine it, so that's what allowed us to be able to excavate and do the work that we did there for so many years.
Yeah.
And you can see from the aerial drone that we have shot, all of that area that you see exposed, all those walls, was done by our team over 15 years. So
Yeah, see, I only went there your second year, and when I
yes,
seen those drone shots, I said that looks like a baseball diamond almost. The way it kind of makes that V shape. I thought, that's a lot of work, man. That's a lot of moving buckets. That's it's like everybody should start. That should be a Jenny Craig workout program out there. That's and I guess it's got to be pretty warm. When I went, it was pretty warm, and I only was there for like 3 weeks. So and it was very early on.
yeah.
Um, so
I
you
think you
mentioned
actually
okay,
dug in my
Numira Bob.
square.
What's that?
I believe actually you dug in my square.
Oh, you know
I
what?
think so.
I might have been in your square. It's been such a long time ago, and it was a square where I believe Dr. Collins first found those clinker shards you're talking about that were glazed, and they desperately were trying to find more. And the short time I was there, they didn't find any more at that particular time. All right,
No, they
and
have
man,
found
they
more
were.
since then.
What's that?
They have found more since then.
Oh, yeah, I've seen. I think it's Dr. Gary Byers with some more in his hand. Um, so back to
Yes.
Numeran Baba Draw, because the reason why not is that you got one actually destroyed. You got Numera Baba Draw, and I believe they're both walled, even though the walls are in deterioration.
Yes.
And Numera was destroyed over 200 years after Baba Draw. And
Yes.
when Baba Draw was destroyed or whatever, it was re-inhabited again for a second time. So you got a lot going on there. Why don't they mention that when they talk about Isnumir and Baba Draw? They tell you all the positive things, but I was just watching a program an hour long, you know, and they
Yeah.
made it seem like this is it, this is not, and then they failed. That makes me so upset because you know what? If you looked at the archaeological reports, which I did, and they did mention exactly what you said, but I did not see that in that podcast. And I
Yes.
thought, I don't know if that's, I don't want to say, but it does make me kind of like, if you're
Uh,
going to use archaeology, we want the facts, and don't be hiding the facts because number one, somebody that's diligent, they can get on the web, read books, and they'll find out, you know.
well,
And
George,
yeah, one is destroyed later.
this is
Not
something
another.
here.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is something that people should understand. For about a year, I consulted with the publisher or the producer, sorry, for National Geographic's Sodom and Gomorrah video. I'd given them all the data, all of the reports, all of the proper dates. And then when they turned around and they produced the show, they got the dates wrong
Mm-hmm.
and they showed pictures from Masada as though they were from Sodom and Gomorrah.
So deceitful, academically deceitful, possibly.
Well, it's for show.
Well, I understand that, but that's not facts. That's kind of deliberate. So
Yeah,
another thing about Nun Mirabadra, they always hit on this, that the tombs were destroyed along with the city. They were the city of Numerababa, excuse me, just Babadra. Babadra has a huge cemetery of over, like they
yes,
think, 500,000, 500,000, which
yeah,
means it can't just be the inhabitants of the city. It has to be maybe semi-nomadic tribes coming in. Their people pass away and they go back to that area and there they bury their dead over a long period of time. And they
yes,
mentioned the charnel houses. It's the houses where, like, a tomb, an ancient mausoleum, if you will, and that they were burned. And the fact that the sea was burned and that the charnel houses, the tombs were burned, it has to be something that is more natural. Okay, we would say an act of God, that it is man-made. But I started thinking about that. You know what? If you think now, I don't know how they really didn't go into that. They said the cities were destroyed. Maybe you can help me with this. They didn't say how they were destroyed. Were they
yes.
destroyed? Did they find sulfur balls in the city? Was that how they were destroyed?
No,
No.
this is
Okay.
this is an argument that Dr. Brantwood makes that the only possibility is that the charnel houses um, in the cemetery were burned from the roof in. That this had to be a result of fire and brimstone coming down out of the sky. I reminded my students when the Assyrians, for example, Chedorlaomer, when he comes down through the site from the Assyrians, what do they do when we have this on the Lakish reliefs in the British Museum, where you have flaming arrows that they shoot from the sky down onto the top of houses. Now, these are charnel houses. They look like mud brick adobe buildings.
Yes, that's
And
exactly
they
right.
placed the bodies inside of them. So the Assyrians are coming down. They think these are places where people are living. And so they attack them, and they obviously would shoot from the sky these burning arrows and destroy the houses. So just because they burned from the roof down does not mean necessarily that they were destroyed by God.
And that's a great point, because another thing is when the Assyrians would attack, they usually take people out from the land and then plant another people to make the other people indigenous. Another way, they take you away from that environment. And I thought, well, you know what? Even today, we got family mausoleums, and we associate that with the closeness. If we think of our families as tribal, and that is our tomb, and that's the area where that the spirits or our relatives probably still coincide. Now, if I was in an ancient mindset, if I was thinking you got a cemetery of 500,000 people in the ancient world and their relatives, is there a chance that they might get in contact with the deities to help them out? I want to make sure there's no chance of that going to happen, right? That might be another avenue. It's like, you burn everything. You don't want, they're not coming back. You're not coming back because your relatives are there. You're not coming back because of the city. We just get rid of all of it.
Yep.
Now, is there any indication, like you said, is there anything left of what caused the destruction? I heard it's an earthquake, and there's evidence of earthquakes, of course. Was there evidence of those sulfur balls? Because that's what they're saying was falling from heaven. But if you find sulfur balls and they're intact, then that means they were never on fire to begin with.
I've traveled that area.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I've traveled that area on numerous occasions. I believe your wife has traveled that same area many times as well. And I've never found any sulfur balls in all of the years that I went there. I found many of the graves were upturned by locals digging up the pottery. Cemetery is directly across the modern road from the ancient city of Babadra. So it's directly across the street or across the road from it. And there's a lot of different tombs there. Now, there's different types of tombs. There's shaft tombs, and they date to a much earlier period. And then they have these charnel houses, which are square adobe structures they made out of mud brick, where they put the bodies. And they date from a later period, from the time period of the early bronze. And as you suggested, the nomads, I believe, were traveling through the region, were bringing their ancestors there and burying them at the cemetery over a long period of time. That's why there's so many of them. Now up in around our site at Tel El Hammam, we have all of these dolmens. Dolmens are slabs of stone with a slab on top. They theorize, and I think with good evidence, that they place the bodies on the top. The scavengers, the birds, would pick all the flesh off for a period of time, and then they would take the bones and they would bury them someplace. And then the dolmen itself would become a ceremonial family tomb where they would place their pottery, because we excavated a number of them that had never been excavated before. And we didn't find bones. We found the pottery from that period of time. So from the early bronze all the way through to the middle bronze period at Tel El Hammam. And there's thousands of them all around the hills. So
fascinating. Well, that's so interesting, because right now in my mind, I could discount Southwest by Masada as being, no matter what the terrain looks like, because you can use your imagination, what it's called pareidolia, like looking up in the clouds and seeing butterflies and whatnot. I can use my pareidolia Southwest That's not going to happen because now I know better because of geologists and people like you. And then I can go to Baba Dra and Numera, but you're not going to fake me out there anymore because now I got Baba Dra and Numera being destroyed 200 years apart. Oh, heck
Yes,
no. And don't tell me they were destroyed by sulfur balls because they're not
there isn't
there.
any.
There isn't any.
Now,
Dude,
George,
that's,
Dr. Collins uses 3 categories, and I like them. It has to be, and we use it for every site in the ancient Near East. Okay, inscriptions are only found at one site, Ekron. We don't even have a primary inscription for Jerusalem saying, this is Jerusalem, or welcome to Jerusalem. So we're not going to find a sign saying, welcome to Sodom. So what do we use? We use geographic indicators. The right place at the right time with the right stuff. Tel El Hammam is in the right place. It's on the Kikar, opposite of Bethlehem Ai. You can't see Baba Dra from there. Tel El Hammam has the right stuff, the right place, the right time period, and Middle Bronze period has the right stuff. It has the destruction layer. Baba Dra has the wrong time period in the wrong place because you can't see it from between Bethel and Ai. The mountains of Jerusalem block it, and you don't have the right stuff. So 3 strikes, you're out.
you know what? We're at the end of our time, and we've just covered a ton of material, and it's been fascinating. And you're explaining each and every area. Those were the 3, usually in documentaries, those are the 3 locations, right? The 3 locations you always hear about. More recently, it's been in the last 10, 15 years, it's been Tel El Hammam. But before that, it was always Numera and Baba Dra, or that area by Masada because of the sulfur balls. But now, because of your time that you're sharing with us, and you've also written a book that the viewers can get their hands on, and we also included a small video with which will display your books as well there. And once again, Doctor, I really appreciate your time. I would love to have you back, and we're going to discuss more topics that go along with your books. I'd love to hear about Mount Ararat. Who wouldn't? Some adventures. I think Dr. Randall Price went up there. Last time I think I said he was up there with a chainsaw.
Randall and I worked together actually at Qumran, and we taught together at Liberty. So yes, we've got some stories to tell.
Yeah. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Will you join us again?
I'd love to. I'd love to.
All right. Thank you so much. It's really been a blessing to have you. And we're going to sign off. This is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. My guest today was Dr. David Graves, and we were talking about the use of salt in the infertility and the barrenness and the ritual of the ancient Near East. And we talked about a whole lot more. And he's going to come back and share with us his knowledge and his experience of over 40 years in the land and a number of his books. Once again, Doctor, thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, George. Appreciate it. Nice to be with you.